What's up, guys? This is TheKephas.
One of the most common questions I get asked, especially by other visually impaired people, is some version of this. Are you working? What do you do for a living? Or what's it like trying to find a job as a visually impaired person? And because I think the way I do, I always read more underneath all of those questions. Like, what do you do with your life when the world isn't built for you? Or can you actually find meaning, direction, and fulfillment despite your disability? Whether it's the real questions or the ones I apparently make up in my head, I think they're all fair to ask. What's interesting is that more and more, I hear the same questions from people who aren't visually impaired at all. People who are working, people who look fine on paper, or people who did everything right, because even people without disabilities can flounder or feel lost. So I want to talk through my own story, not as a success story or as some kind of a blueprint, but just honestly, where I've been, where things fell apart, and where I eventually found direction again after the life I trained for quietly disappeared. See, I've been visually impaired my whole life. That was never a surprise. I grew up knowing that some things were going to be harder. School was harder, transportation was harder, even independence is hard. So when people say, well, finding work is hard for everyone, I agree, but it's still different. See, when you graduate high school and you already know that the safety nets are thinner and you're going to need more help and that the margin for error is much smaller, you feel the pressure early. Growing up, I always knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a minister. That wasn't a phase. I loved reading the Bible. I loved speaking, I loved encouraging people, and I loved helping people think clearly and honestly about their lives and about God. So when I graduated, the question wasn't what do I want to do, it was how do I get there? I was part of the Assemblies of God at the time, so naturally I looked there. A lot of my friends were going off to Bible college, out of state, across the country, and realistically that wasn't an option for me. Between my vision, transportation, benefits, and just the sheer complexity of relocating, I didn't feel like I could survive that jump. So instead, I went the correspondence route. I did online training. You take a bunch of courses, pass a few exams, it's roughly a 2 to 3 year process. I did the work, I finished it, and I became a licensed minister. And then nothing happened. No one set me down and explained what came next. No one helped me network. No one opened doors. I was in the system, technically, but not held by it. Sure, I was preaching sometimes and I was heavily involved at my church. I loved being behind the pulpit. I loved writing sermons and I loved the feeling of speaking to real human struggles. But I wasn't employed. I wasn't progressing. I was paying monthly fees to keep the license, and I was required to tithe, and I wasn't working because I couldn't find work. So I'm living on disability benefits, paying to remain licensed in a system that wasn't actually doing anything for me, and that tension wears on you. Then I got letters from the district. They suspected I wasn't tithing properly because my contributions were so small, and that kind of broke something in me. I explained my situation and they apologized. They said they'd make a note, offered newsletters, events I couldn't afford to attend, and another year passed. Then I got the same letter again. And at that point, I knew. I surrendered the license. I walked away from the thing I had built my identity around since childhood, and there was no backup plan waiting underneath it. Around that same time, I tried college. I went into graphic design because I'm kind of a creative person and ironically, I enjoy thinking visually. But transportation was unreliable. The city service I depended on failed me repeatedly and unfortunately the school just didn't seem to care why I was late. My grades were penalized and eventually it just all fell apart. All of that happened within a couple of years, and suddenly I wasn't anchored to anything. I had no career path, no ministry track, no school, and no forward motion. I kind of felt like I was floating in the middle of the ocean without a rope or a raft or a direction. I was just existing. And people sometimes look at that kind of life and say, well, you're lucky, you don't have to work. But you need to understand, when you don't have a north, when you don't have a direction pulling you forward, waking up every day with nothing demanding you is not freedom. It's not peace either. It's just as destructive as working a job you hate, just in a different way. Because in both cases, your life is not moving towards something your heart actually wants. For a long time, I just lived humbly, very humbly. I did what I could to enjoy life because that's something I've had to learn how to do. But underneath it, I was restless. What am I doing? What is this for? Is this really all life has to offer for me? Eventually, I had to sit down and ask a different question. Not what do I want to be, but what do I actually enjoy doing? By that point, I had already been doing YouTube for a while. I loved games, I loved helping people, I loved explaining things, encouraging people, talking honestly, and that's when it clicked. A lot of what I loved about ministry, I was already doing. The difference was baggage. Ministry came with red tape, expectations, identity constraints, a system I no longer fit into, and honestly, beliefs I no longer held the same way. Content creation didn't have any of that. I could speak, help, create, encourage, I could play games, and I could build something without asking permission. So I chose to lean into that. Not because it was easy or because it was a guarantee, but because I genuinely enjoyed the process. And something interesting happened. The more I put into it, the more it grew. I don't know how big it'll ever get, and I genuinely mean that, but it gives my days direction and fulfillment. And of course, money matters. We all have needs, especially if you have a family, but here's something I've noticed over and over again. Talk to older people and ask them what they regret. I've never had anyone ever tell me that I wish I made more money. They usually say something like, I wish I followed what mattered to me, or I wish I spent my time better, or I wish I lived more. And I think one of the worst feelings a person can have is reaching the end of their life knowing they never really tried to move toward what they cared about most. So if you're floundering right now, I want to say this clearly. It's okay to stop and ask, is this actually what I want? And if it is, great, then ask, what part of this do I actually enjoy? Because sometimes the thing we're chasing isn't the role, it's the feeling, the activity, or the contribution. And sometimes there are other ways to get there. Don't force it, sit with it, pay attention to what fills your cup. What do you think about when you wake up? What do you lose track of time doing? We're often told to chase whatever makes the most money. The problem is everyone hears that advice. These days, everybody wants to be a content creator. People see all the success and think it's easy, but it's not. It may not be the hardest job in the world, but it's still work, hours of work. And if that process sounds miserable to you, you shouldn't do it. This is something I tell my nephews all the time. If the process feels like work, you're not going to last. The people who win are the ones who enjoy getting better. And that brings me to something else. Being bad at something is not permanent. That belief traps a lot of people. No, I'm just not good at that. Well, neither was anyone else at the beginning. Skill is built. If you love something, you'll want to get better. You'll continue to do it despite not being very good at it, and over time, that consistency builds skill. When you're into something for the love of the game, it makes all the difference. And yeah, there's luck. I mean, of course there is, but if luck is the problem, then the answer is simple. You keep rolling. You don't need 100 yeses, you need one. Whether you're applying for a job, looking for a date, or doing pretty much anything else in life. You can get told no 1,000 times, have 100 doors slam in your face, and all you need is one door that opens. So keep rolling. Because I'll be completely honest about myself. I'm severely visually impaired. I don't leave the house much. I've never had a lot of money. I grew up very poor. I'm a nerd who plays video games. I'm not particularly fit. I don't have the most impressive credentials. I've made mistakes, a lot of them. And still, I have a wife whom I love very much and who loves me the same. We have 2 amazing kids and a home and a life that feels like ours. Not everything's perfect and it's not always easy, but it's real. People hear that and say, you just got lucky. Maybe. I feel very fortunate to have what I have, but I haven't always been lucky. I've drawn a lot of dead hands actually. Bad spawn RNG, broken home, systems that failed me over and over, but here's the truth. Even if every excuse is true, the responsibility is still yours. That doesn't mean you have to fix everything, and it certainly doesn't mean that you have to do it alone, but it's your responsibility to work with what you have. And the good news is that most circumstances aren't permanent, they're seasons. So if you don't like where your life is at, plan your escape. Move in the direction you want your life to be in, one step at a time, even when it feels pointless. Because one day you'll look back and realize you're not who you used to be and you're not where you used to be. And that's how direction is forged. Not overnight, not magically, but honestly, patiently, and with one step at a time.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.